Today's episode of DRL is brought to you by Hella Cocktail Company. My guests don't just come to DRL for me. They also come for the cocktails. Luckily, my friends at Hella Cocktail Company have my back. These guys make amazing mixes, from Bloody Mary to Margarita to Moscow Mule. They also make cocktail bitters, my secret ingredient, and now yours too. It's easy to feel like the best bartender in town when every bottle comes with a simple recipe on it. Hella Cocktail Company, bold flavor, real ingredients, hospitality. Mixing it up since 2011. Shop the collection on Amazon Prime or use code DRL online at hellacocktail.co for free shipping. Hello, my lovely listeners. Welcome back to another episode of DRL, where we're talking everything dating, relationships, and love. I'm your host, Tanisha Wood. With everything happening in the last couple weeks with, the Will and Jada situation, the entanglements and all that, I got to thinking deeply about how detanglements happen, meaning divorce. So I invited Kimberly Cook on today, and she's a divorce attorney. So we're going to get into, first of all, how you prevent divorce, because I'm sure, within her practice, she's seen a lot of it and probably have thought at some point, they could have stopped this. So we'll talk about how to prevent it. If it is going to happen, what are some things that you could talk about even prior to getting married to sort of help ease the pain that is divorce. And I saw a recent statistic that said the divorce rate was like over 60%. And I thought that can't even be right. Then I dug further and it turns out it is right. And it's happening so much. So let's dig into why some of that might be. Hi, Kimberly.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited to join you today. This is such a great topic and it's definitely timely. And we can talk about all the things, entanglements, detanglements, because it's a lot happening for people.
Well, first off, what even made you want to become a divorce attorney?
I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. Prior to law school, I taught seventh grade. And I was so just curious about all the kind of back stuff that kids bring to school. And a lot of it stems from what's going on in their home life. So I always had just a curiosity about, people's families and their lives.
So when couples come to you, what do they cite as their main reason for divorce?
And a lot of people think a lot of times, a couple will come in, but generally speaking, it's one or the other. And I have people all the time who come in and they say, I don't even know if divorce is what I should be doing or thinking about, but here's what I know. I know that we are not on the same page and something's happening. And so a lot of times what I do is kind of walk through, well, what's happening? And 9 times out of 10, what you'll find is that there's just a breakdown in communication. So I know a lot of people often think that, it has to do with infidelity or an affair, but that's generally the symptom. That's not the cause. There's been a breakdown, there's been a disconnect earlier on or something that's just you're not on the same page about. Whether the issue stems from financial, whether it's, infidelity, generally it's because people are not talking to one another or don't have the ability to communicate with one another, because that's a big thing. You're talking but you're not actively listening or you're not receiving. And so there's really just been a breakdown in that communication. So I think, that's going to be your main issue. But then separate and apart from that, I think there's a lot of people who don't think about marriage being a legal relationship and it's essentially a contract between two people. Yep. I know that's not romantic sounding, but that's really what it is. And so a lot of times what we find is that people get into these contracts or relations without knowing all the information, right? So, many of us will make an informed decision about buying a new car and we'll take, test drives and we will get all the information and we will talk to friends and we will do all the things. But when it comes to dating and relationships, we are very close to the chest. Yep. About, what's going on in a relationship. We'll oftentimes, avoid the red flags.
Because we want the relationship so much that we're like, that's not a big deal. We can change that later. That'll improve. He has potential.
The sad part about it is, especially I see with Black women, we are getting married much later. And, I don't want to say that we bring sometimes a sense of desperation, but I think a lot of times what happens, we start closing in on 40 and up, we start really panicking about, I wanted, kids, I want a future, I want it. And so instead of asking a lot of questions, we just kind of go with it.
Yep.
And that go with it, can really hurt us in the long run, because we find out things way too late, or to your point, we ignore things that we shouldn't have otherwise ignored.
And the interesting part about it is often these are really smart women that are accomplished in other areas. And then you sort of think like, well, how did you not ask that? How did you end up with a guy like this? Why did you not think to look into this or that? And you find that it is because there's this sort of urgency where the other stuff will get worked out later. But for now, I've found somebody that is somewhat on the same page because they also want a marriage and kids, not realizing that that'll cause a lot of heartache in the long run.
My clients are very successful and, to your point, are doing big things in their careers. And we're talking about entrepreneurs, we're, business owners, executives, and it is shocking when they come in and say, my home life is a wreck. And because you can't imagine that, here you have a CEO or a CFO or a business owner who is, managing, hundreds of people and thousands of dollars of profit or inventory, but yet their home financials, they're like, I don't know what, my spouse is spending. I don't know where the information is. We haven't filed tax return. Like, you'd be surprised. And a part of it is, us being kind of hopeless romantics, right? And we want love to kind of take care of everything, that we excuse things that we wouldn't otherwise excuse in our own businesses. And so as a divorce attorney, my job is to look at the marriage at almost the same way that a business executive is looking at a business partnership. These are two people that came together, they formed a partnership, and it is my job to kind of unwind that partnership. And that's less kind of the love part than people think, and more of the financial unwinding. And so when you find yourself in a divorce attorney's office, a lot of times people are very shocked to learn that I don't spend a lot of time, at least in the initial session, kind of getting into, all of the nuances about certain aspects of your relationships. What I'm trying to gather really is a baseline, so what your assets, what your income, what we have together, because I need to kind of understand how things flowed. But then on the relationship side, when did this change, right? And so if you say to me, I have no idea how much my spouse ever earned, right? Wow. There, that tells me we weren't on the same page from day one.
Wow. To me, that's like a very early in the relationship question. Like, you don't have to tell me the exact dollar amount, but I need within a 10K range.
We are not asking what I call those crucial questions. We're not having crucial conversations. And these are the kinds of conversations that then they build and they grow into problems. So for example, do you really want children? A lot of people kind of push over that, or they ignore that. If you do, say that you do from the get-go.
Immediately. That's a date one request.
Oh, for sure. You need to be very upfront about that. Don't skirt around that. But the same is true if you do not want children. Not everybody wants children, and that's okay. But you should be upfront about that, because I can tell you that how you feel today is 90% of how you're going to feel even after you get married. Do people change their mind? Sure. But don't bank on somebody changing their mind about something as fundamental as that, because you would be surprised how many people come in my office and they say, I never wanted children. I now have 2 children who I love and adore, but my career is not what I want it to be. And there's so much resentment directed at their spouse.
Is that a big reason for divorce? One person wanting kids and the other person not wanting them?
It is. It is. So when we deal with wanting or not wanting, but also another one that's really big is, what are we going to do once the children are born? A lot of people do not have a conversation about whether or not they want to go back to work, or whether or not their spouse is going to go back to work. And so it just kind of, baby happens, everybody is excited, then you've got maternity leave, and somebody is dancing around whether or not they're going back. and there's been no clear plan or path or expectation. And so all of a sudden, here it is, time to go back to work. And, one or the other is saying, no, I wanted you to stay home. Or I wanted to stay home. I'm not interested. And so now it becomes friction and an issue. Again, lack of communication.
But how do you think something like that gets missed? Like, okay, we have a child. Clearly somebody has to take care of the child. Clearly somebody has to, or both, earn the money in order to take care of the child. So how does that conversation not happen? I mean, there's the 9 months of pregnancy and then however long a maternity or paternity leave is. But like in that time, how are people missing these conversations and details?
I think that people actively avoid what could potentially be difficult conversations. So to give an example, if you grew up with a stay-at-home mom and that's what you want for you and for your children, and you just kind of assumed that your spouse would be fine with that because they knew that your mom stayed at home, but you never really had that conversation, right? So then you have the spouse on the other end who doesn't want to look like the jerk in saying, so what's the plan with you going back to work? Like, what are we doing? Like, is there a plan here? And so that's where people just it's active avoidance, right? But in the active avoidance, what happens is some decision is made, but one person is resentful in how that decision came about. And it wasn't like it was actively made, it just kind of happened. So you just didn't go back to work, or you did. So it's an active avoidance. That's the one way. The other way, though, sometimes it honestly just happened. So I've had situations where the conversation throughout, say, the pregnancy, with the expectation was that, someone was going back to work. Well, then maybe there was a difficult pregnancy, or maybe then the child was born and had some special needs. And so, circumstances kind of then dictate a change in plan, but you're so focused on, addressing that circumstance that people don't actually ask, how are you feeling about being the primary caretaker at home? Or are you okay if I stay at home for 6 months, a year to focus on this? And because people aren't, again, buzzword, communicating, right? Then again, life just happens, things are made, but at some point there's like a budding resentment, and that budding resentment grows and grows and grows and grows until there's just such a breakdown that someone ends up in my office. Anytime somebody comes in, it's a blank slate. So I never assume that what worked for, somebody who could have just left my office 5 minutes ago, even if the facts seem to be similarly situated, are going to be the same. Families are very unique.
The culmination of everything you're saying seems to be this lack of clarity and communication around what things are. Like there's a lot of assumptions that come with marriage. And then just in turn, a lot of important things aren't really talked about.
Marriage is hard. Make no mistake. There are good days, there are bad days, even in the best of marriages, which, as an aside, and we can circle to, I always cringe when I see on social media people with the hashtag relationship goals on like people's, posts all the time. I'm like, eek, you actually don't know what you're, saying right. that what goal you're aspiring to.
Your goal might be that photo, but you don't know what's happening behind that.
Right. So let's say that, hashtag relationship photo goals or something. Right. Because you have no idea what's happening behind closed doors. But I say that because going into marriage, does anybody actually think that they're going to end up, in a divorce attorney's office? No. Right? Like very rarely is somebody getting married and then they're like, oh, right, because we're going to get divorced tomorrow. People it's just not a thing. But that said, a lot of people come to getting married for a variety of reasons. And you got to ask yourself, why did I get married? That's a real question. Or why am I getting married to this individual? And that's a hard question to ask, and it's a deeply personal question, but I will tell you, it is a question that I ask potential clients all the time when they come in. I'm asking you, why did you get married, and why do you want a divorce? And if you can't answer those, then I'm sending you back. Go back and come back when you can give me an answer. And it cannot be because my brother, sister, mother, cousin said I should, because that's not going to work. You have to do the work. You have to ask yourself those questions, and they're hard.
When you ask that question, do you get the answer a lot? Well, because I just thought I should. Like, well, why did you get married? Well, it was just, I went to college and then I found a job and it's almost like they're going through life just sort of checking boxes because they think they should, and it's just a part of what you do, and haven't really taken the time to reevaluate or to evaluate whether it's for them.
If their answer to my question is, well, I got married right out of college, then I ask, then why stay married so long? Because if you're now in my office, right, and you're 10, 15 years removed from, I was kind of doing the checkbox, then tell me, when did things change in the marriage and why you stayed so long? Because if you tell me from the first year, it's been awful, my spouse has been horrible, I have been unhappy, but here we are year 15, then I need to understand why.
Is it generally about the kids?
That's what people say, but that's not always the truth. People a lot of times use the kids as the excuse. So a lot of times people will say, well, I didn't want my kids to have the same last name. I didn't want to disrupt the kids. I didn't want, them to be living in two households. And then I play the devil's advocate and I say, but yet you were okay with them seeing you unhappy every day. But yet it was okay that your spouse was screaming at you in front of the kids. And I don't do that in a way to embarrass or harass, but I need to understand, because here's the deal. From the minute you hit my office, and we walk through these issues, in my head, I'm trying to build a layout and a strategy to get you from point A to point B. But I need to understand the underlying issues in order to help you navigate those. And if you say to me, oh, well, I stayed for 15 years, completely unhappy, for my kids, well, what changed now? Why are you here now? Why didn't you do it last year or the year before? Sometimes people say, well, financially, I wasn't prepared. Emotionally, I wasn't prepared. Then that allows me to dig deeper in saying, okay, then here's the roadmap for us to address those things. Because if you don't tell me, you better believe that the other side is going to tell me. So it's better that you own up to those issues. It's better that you're forthcoming from the get-go, regardless of what it is. And trust me, if you're in a divorce attorney's office, they've heard a lot of things. Just go ahead and unleash it. Because again, not communicating, not being open and honest about things, that's really problematic, especially at the time of a divorce.
So when people come into your office, do both parties at that point usually know that a divorce is looming, or is it generally kind of a surprise to people, like, oh, you went and saw a divorce attorney? I didn't even know we were there.
50% of the time I have someone come in who says, my spouse and I have been unhappy for years, and, it's time. We've both kind of, I think, separately decided. They know that I'm talking or researching or whatever. On the flip side, you have people who come in who say, I'm not even sure I'm ready yet, but there's just a breakdown in my marriage. I want to explore my options. I want to kind of understand some things. It's more of an exploratory. And then you've got another small group who will come in, who will say, I'm ready to go, and this is going to blindside my spouse.
Wow. I feel like that's not the way to do it.
Well, this is the thing. You have to look at divorce as a death of a marriage, right? And so when we talk about grief, there are stages of grief. It's the same is true when you're dealing with divorce. So there are people who are going to be angry. There are people who are going to be in denial. There are people who are at the acceptance. And so the real trick when somebody comes in to meet with me for the first time is for me to listen but for certain clues or buzzwords to see if I can identify where in this stage are you. And then when we file, I am very upfront and clear to say your case is really going to move depending on where your spouse is. So think about it this way. If you are at the acceptance level, right? You are done, marriage is done, you've had your cry, and you're like, let's just wrap this up. But your spouse is at the denial phase. How fast do you think this case is moving? Not fast. I've got an opposing counsel or an opposing side who has to convince their client that this is actually happening. That's a hard thing to do, to get somebody to get behind this idea of your marriage is over. There's a disconnect. So the process of divorce is not as cut and dry a lot of the times as people think. And when people think about, oh my God, it's got to be so salacious and it's got to be so dramatic, I often tell people it can be, but not for the reasons that you think. And actually, when it gets like that, it's actually very sad. It is not as enticing and as juicy and as, because you have somebody who's in real pain that is, it's manifesting itself in, I can't get over whatever the issue is, or I will spend all the money in the world to just stay entangled in this mess, right? Because that keeps me connected to this individual in some way.
So let's talk about how to prevent all this. Prenups. Okay. Is a prenup something that you recommend every married couple get or look into before getting married? Or is it strictly for people maybe with, a lot of assets or have already built up a lot of wealth before getting married?
I look at a prenup like an insurance policy. To me, every individual should research and investigate having a premarital agreement. None of us want anything to happen bad in our lives, but we have life insurance to protect our estates and our assets in the event something were to happen to us or our family members. We have auto insurance, not because we, are going to buy this new car and we hope that we're going to drive off the lot and then we're going to get, into some sort of car accident, but we have it to protect that, right? It's the same with a premarital agreement. It is not in any indication that you don't want this marriage to work. However, it is the recognition that in the event, for whatever reason, it doesn't work, we have this document that it will help unwind what we have brought in together or separately to protect our individual interest on a going forward basis. Now, is a premarital agreement cookie cutter? No. Is it best for everybody? No. But should everybody look into it and research it and understand what it can and can't do? Yes. It's about making an informed decision. And if you decide we're good, we don't need it, okay, no harm, no foul. But not to look into it, not to research it is a big mistake. And I will tell you that, yes, the understanding for a lot of people, or the assumption for a lot of people is, you have to be very wealthy, right? It only protects the wealthy. Well, I will say to you, that's not true. People who have any kind of assets, you own a home, you have an asset, you have a retirement account, that's an asset. Your spouse has a lot of debt. You have no debt. So there are things that you can do to make sure that what you came in with, you are at least going to leave with. That's what it's designed to do.
Yeah. A friend of mine who is a financial planner, she had her husband pay off his debt before they could get married as a condition of them getting married, which I thought was brilliant because once you do get married, you're taking on another person's liabilities and their debts as well.
Debt is a very tricky thing. And when we talk about, why people are getting divorced, there's a real issue between spenders and shoppers. And if you are not on the same page about savings plan and, how we invest or how we prepare for the future, it's a problem. And we see that a lot. So we see a lot of times people come in and they say, when I got married, I had X amount of dollars in savings, no debt. What I didn't know is that my now spouse had $100,000 in credit card debt. And, now I'm so confused as to what to do. Am I responsible? I've got the people calling me. You need to know these things. It's just like taxes, though. You'll be shocked to learn that people come in all the time and they say, I had no idea that my spouse didn't pay taxes before we got married. And then here we got married. We went to go file jointly and I then inherit, this huge tax bill. And now we're audited. Talk, communicate, get the information, know these things.
I say sit down with each other, go over your credit karma. just line by line. Okay, what's that credit card? Okay, how much do you owe on that? Okay, what's that student loan? Like, I would hate this sort of surprise. Oh my God, that would piss me off. Like, we go to get a house, and I'm like, wait, what?
Right, that's what happens.
No.
That's what, but okay, so that's where it happens. And people have no idea. They have no idea. Or you're married and you're like, oh, well, my spouse pays all the bills. I don't know, what accounts we have. The bills just get paid.
I hate it when women in particular say stuff like that.
All the
time.
How
do you have zero idea what is going on in your financial life?
Zero idea. And the problem with that, though, is that I'm the bearer of bad news saying, actually, what's happening is he's robbing Peter or she is robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? So you are living this $1 million life, but your house is mortgaged to the nines. Your, credit cards are maxed out. You don't have any retirement assets. And people are looking at me like you're lying. And I'm like, actually, here are the documents that you never look at.
Receipts.
Yeah. You got to know what's going on in your household. If you are afraid to ask, that's a red flag.
100%. We don't have to agree on everything, but we have to have the ability to talk about everything.
We don't have to agree, but at least you have the information. To your point of sitting down and going through the credit karma, listen, it doesn't have to be a, uncomfortable conversation because it's already a little touchy. You're dating somebody, you're getting serious, you get engaged, and then you're like, all right, show me your credit report. Okay, that's a little tough. However, you do need to be able to say, once we get married, what are we going to do about paying bills and really kind of getting an understanding of our finances? And you can even do it under I would be devastated if something were to happen to you, because then it's not about, I'm not divorce planning, I'm not getting injured, but things happen. Right. Things happen. I mean, do you think Kobe Bryant's family thought that he was going to get on that helicopter that morning and not come home? No. And I say that as things happen in our lives. And so even if you are concerned about having the conversation because you don't want your fiance to start thinking that you're, got bad intentions, do it from the perspective of, I love you so much. I care about you so much that I want to make sure that if something were to happen to you, we could still pay the bills. We could still, and the same with when you have children, before you get married or after you get married, have that conversation and put it on them. God forbid something were to happen to you. I don't know how the kids' tuition would be paid because I don't know what account we paid it from. Mm-hmm. And if you keep getting kind of stonewalled, if you keep getting the runaround, those are red flags.
Yeah. People don't hide something when there's nothing to hide.
That's right.
I think it's really important to talk about money like while you're dating,
You
because
should.
I think people don't have the conversation and then it starts to feel really uncomfortable when all of a sudden now we're engaged and this is the first time I'm even asking you how much money you make.
Yeah. Look, here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with, if you're dating somebody and you've met them through however you met them, and you're on now date 3 and you don't know where they work, you don't know what they do, you need to find out before date 4. I mean, seriously, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to be a year in and have no idea what this person does for a living.
So, what's the craziest case you've ever had or just shocking?
I had a case years ago where I knew the family relatively well, and we were pretty far into the divorce, and infidelity wasn't even on the radar. It was kind of like we are just going our separate ways. And as I'm going through the finances, I keep kind of seeing this kind of recurring like charge, same amount around the same time. And, I Google it or nothing comes up. My paralegal Googles it and nothing. And so I'm like, what is this? Right. And so I asked my client and she's like, I don't know. It's just, it was kind of like one of those, on PayPal, sometimes there's a PayPal charge and then you can't follow the description or it's a weird description, right?
Yeah.
And it's probably something you ordered from Instagram, but whatever. And so, but as we started to add up the amount, it was a really high amount. And so I asked the opposing counsel, I said, listen, something is bothering me here. Like with this amount. And he was like, fine, I'll ask my client about it. And lo and behold, the client was a member of like a swingers kind of club. And my client had no idea.
Wow.
And that then started to kind of unravel all of these other kind of, this whole underground world that I had no idea like existed, and all these conferences and all this just stuff that was a lesson in education for me, that when you are going through, again, when you start asking questions, when you start noticing things kind of out of the ordinary, take note. And it's interesting because when we learned this and we figured out what it was, she was able to kind of put 2 and 2 together, because she would then say things like, twice a month, he had these late business meetings, but a lot of his clients are in town. And so it made sense that he would have to. So things started to add up. But then she was like, but I always thought it was weird that he couldn't have his phone on him. Take note. Wow. If something in your gut is like bothering you, then that's your instincts telling you, look into that. And you should do that too when you're dating. You should absolutely gut check all the time. It's so important.
Ask questions. Ask questions.
We started this conversation by me saying, people get into my office because of the lack of communication. You have to ask questions and keep asking them until you get an answer. Don't just accept a, I don't know, or no answer at all. And if you don't get the answer that either you like or that makes sense, then ask yourself, what am I doing? Because you don't want to, again, dismiss it. You don't want to just let it go, because once you get married, those same things stay around. Nothing changes. It's so important.
I think a lot of people think that like the ring will somehow change who this person is or how they're acting. Well, like, oh, when we get married, he'll communicate more. He'll act like this. And it's crazy. I'm like, marriage only makes things harder. Like marriage and children make things infinitely harder than they already are. So if they're hard and you're having troubles communicating and you're seeing all these red flags, there's only going to be more of that when you get married and when you have children, because there's more pressure.
It's more pressure. The stakes are higher. Getting that ring is not a magic bullet. A person will only change when they want to change. And to your point, when you are dating someone and you see these flags, or if you're having to convince yourself that things will get better once you have the baby, or things will get better once you have the ring, they don't. They only amplify, it only magnifies any issues that you may be having. You should go into marriage making informed decisions to help really mitigate. Hopefully you ending up in my office. But you know what? Sometimes it is what it is. Sometimes people just grow apart, even if they communicate well, even if, there's no animosity. There are some relationships that just, their story is over, and that's okay too. And I deal with those all the time, where people come in and they're like, there's no infidelity, there's no domestic violence, we just have decided that we have grown apart. I think that's where you see here, what's the Hollywood version of like the uncoupling,
consciously uncoupling.
Yes. But I just saw Darius Rucker and his wife Rucker from Hootie and the Blowfish. He kind of referenced this idea of uncoupling, and they've been married for a very long time and they have children. And, I think that's kind of the phrasing that people use when they're like, there's nothing else here other than we just aren't going in the same space, in the same direction. And so that happens. You can't necessarily prevent that. That's just life. But most people, it's really because of something. A lack of communication has caused some other issue.
How does being a divorce attorney impact your own marriage? Like, does it make you more pessimistic, do you think? Or does it make you more cautious? How does it impact it overall?
For me, it is, I'm certainly more in tune to making sure that I'm not making assumptions, making sure that he and I talk through anything that may be bothering one of us, but I'm also a better spouse because I recognize that I have a great partnership and I have a great partner, and everybody doesn't have that, because I've seen behind people's houses and I know what's going on. And so it makes me, very grateful in that. I'm like, his snoring drives me crazy, but I'm going to keep him around. I can deal with that. Right. But yeah, I think overall, just our level of communication.
So what are the top 3 things that people could do to prevent divorce?
The number one thing, talk. Number 2, don't rush into it. And number 3, make sure that you are doing this for you. Love is great, but love isn't going to pay the bills. And so you got to be smart, not saying that, you have to marry, somebody who's super wealthy, but I'm definitely saying that you should absolutely know what you're getting into so that you can protect yourself and you can protect your children or your future children, in the event you have them.
And look into a prenup.
Look into a prenup. Well, that's a part of the don't rush and get your information and, make an informed decision. Listen, dating is great. Date, have fun, do all the things. Like, don't, you have the rest of your life to live and to be married. But, when you find that person that you truly believe is the person that you want to, spend your life with, then okay, then let's do the work and let's ask the questions and let's invest in this relationship in such a way that you see yourself growing in development.
So this was so helpful. And like I said, we never talk about this stuff. So I'm really glad that we're able to have a conversation about it and hopefully help people out prior to needing to see you.
Well, thanks for having me on. Quickly, I would just add though, don't not come in. Even if you've got questions, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt if you're dating and you're in a serious relationship, or you guys are getting to that point, or you're recently engaged. There's nothing wrong with going in and meeting with a family lawyer and just saying, hey, I just want to kind of explore some options, or what are your thoughts about a prenup, or what do you think about this scenario? Or you're newly married, or you've, 3-5 years in and, some things are kind of off. There have been people who come into my office all the time and I say to them, you don't need to get a divorce. You need to just go see a couples counselor. So don't be afraid to go and talk and get the information, and then you can make a decision.
So you have a platform, it's called Grown Girl Divorce, and on there you give a lot of advice about divorce, marriages, etc., similar to what you did today. So where can people reach you?
Please follow me on Instagram. I'm at Grown Girl Divorce, as well as on Facebook. I am a divorce and family law partner with the law firm of Schiller, Ducanto, and Fleck in Chicago, Illinois. And so you can certainly check me out on that website. The great thing about the Grown Girl Divorce platform is you will get a lot of kind of motivational tips and tidbits that I think have been very helpful to both my clients and potential clients in a digestible format. So please check it out. We are also working on a greeting card line because this is a tough time, as well as a podcast. So we'll hope, please follow at Grown Girl Divorce for updates.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to that podcast.
It should be fun.
And please reach out to me at Tanisha Wood on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and let me know what you think of today's show. And until next time, wish me love. Hello again, my lovely listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of DRL. If you like the show, be sure to go on iTunes and leave a rating and also write a review. And don't forget to share with your friends and tell them all about DRL. Thank you so much for supporting.